So whether it's water rights, precious metals, steel, oil, agricultural products, you name it. His big thing was always that retail investors focus on demand and they focus on what's hot, and that's what gets news headlines. But where the money really is made was on the supply side. And in terms of what is in short supply or what will be in short supply. And it works with real estate, but it works better, for oil. But essentially, either you're a contrarian or you're going to be a victim. And what we often see is people who chase a hot market and they get so caught up in all the people moving there, or it's a hot job market, but they'll lose sight of the fact that there's overbuilding. And not every market, and right now real estate, it's not as much a threat, but there are certain markets where rents are coming down. I mean, look at Phoenix. I'm no expert on Phoenix. My friend Elijah Brown, that's all he focuses on is Arizona, and particularly Phoenix. He just had a post recently. We actually just talked about it at Kapiolani Park. We had a little get together. He's been lowering rents. He's like, look, I gotta have the place occupied. Like, no rent is just not acceptable right now. Right now, we're trying to survive these higher rates and the inflation of all my expenses. $100 less rent. I mean, okay, maybe it doesn't look great on distributing money to the investors, but this is how we survive. We got to be occupied. Phoenix saw a tremendous increase in supply. So it's just kind of funny. It's like the first thing you learn in economics in school, for most people, you're going to learn that boring chart, and you're going to learn how to chart, and they're going to talk about price, and they're going to talk about it being a very simple, function of supply and demand. But for some reason, I don't know why, most people overly fixate on the demand. And, a classic example that people will give is in the 70s, I believe it was the 70s, we find out lead isn't good for you, right? It was in the paint, it was in the gasoline, it was all over the place. And demand was obviously going to go down, and less companies were going to produce lead. But here's the problem. We still use a lot of lead. We still use lead to this day, obviously for bullets and other things. And I'm not a very, scientific person, but there's still a lot of applications that are going to involve lead. But if there's less people producing the lead, you have to ask yourself, did the supply decrease more than the demand decreased? What would happen to the price? And so, oddly enough, the few companies that remained in a very unpopular industry made a ton of money in lead. More current to, our age group would be, we somehow magically figured out that cigarettes are bad for you and cause cancer, right? Kind of bizarre it took so long to figure that out. And obviously there was a fire sale on tobacco stocks. Were you going to start Mitchell Tobacco right as all these massive multi-billion-dollar lawsuits were coming out? No. So the amount of suppliers of cigarettes decreased. But here's the thing, did people stop smoking?
Not that I can see.
Did tobacco companies settle and have lots of lobbyists to limit their downside on these settlements? There was a time when, maybe not so much now, but there was a wonderful 10, 15-year run where, frankly, the best stocks you could have bought were tobacco stocks. The share prices went up, they had tremendous buybacks, and they were pumping out dividends like nobody's business. They're making money hand over fist. It's funny. It was like one of the best things that ever happened to you as the owner of a Philip Morris stock was the government interfering in a market and scaring the hell out of people. You see this all the time in things. So, and I just always try to remind people, like, the news articles are written generally, this is where I'm going to get in trouble. This is where it gets rude. But a lot of news articles, and I don't mean to attack the source, but, they're written by individuals that
feed the beast.
They're
written to feed the beast.
No, but it's worse. I look at the bios of a lot of the people writing business articles, and I'm like, not to be sexist, but it's like a young lady who went to an all-women's liberal arts college and studied poetry, and now she's writing a business article. And no offense, she lives in her mother's basement, and I'm like.
So I have a story about that I'll tell you offline. That's with my best friend and I about a stock. That this guy was hammering him. He was on the boards. He took a really large position. And if he would have kept that position, he would have made a tremendous amount of money. And to your point, he was listening to some guy writing with a platform, it seemed, from a position of authority, it seemed, and had no idea what he was talking about. Zero idea what he was talking about. And he essentially convinced convinced one of my best friends to sell this position, and he missed out on. He still follows the stock years later, Andy, to look at how much money he lost. It's one of those. It was a golden ticket stock. Obviously, you're not going to win on every one. You got to let him go. But that one he has held on to. So I do agree. And I also think that there's obviously a lot of things going on behind the scenes. You know, we could get into JP Morgan and, you know, Bitcoin positions and all that kind of stuff too.